session so that you can go back later and watch it, do whatever you want to do with it. Okay, back to business. Let's talk about Pearson real quick. I know that some of you haven't finished Pearson. Here's my thoughts. We're going to fight the knowledge, not the Pearson. So I know you've got probably a full day of classes. You've got a schedule. If you can get after it earlier than later, that's great. I've extended it till midnight or 1 minute before midnight tonight. That's all the homeworks and validation 2C and the extra credit. So if we get into a situation for the third night tonight, I'm just going to call it. And I really don't want you to worry about it. The extra credit is obviously extra credit, but if we get into a situation tonight, I'm not going to delay it another day. I'm just going to call it. What I'm going to do with the points, well, I'm not going to penalize those who haven't finished it. I'm not going to penalize those who have. I just don't want us to get hung up on that right now. The purpose of Pearson is obviously to get the reps in. If Pearson crashes again, you got to get your reps somewhere else. There's problems in the back of every chapter in your book. You can go back over U drives, solo drives, squad drives. At this point, though, I don't want us to fight Pearson. I want us to fight the knowledge. I want you to continue to prep for Thursday. And I don't think that Pearson is the only way to do that. So we'll see what tonight brings. Obviously, again, if you've got the time to get after Pearson, it's working today. I don't know if it is. I haven't checked. But I want you to get after it earlier than later. If you have any individual questions about where you stand with Pearson and this and that, we can certainly talk about it. I don't want you to be stressed out about it. I don't want you to wait around until 9 o'clock to try to do it either. There's some theories out there that we've crashed the system. I don't really believe that. I would think Pearson could handle all that. But anyway, you see I've got there kind of an expletive in front of Pearson. So enough said on that for now. The rest of our agenda, we're going to go into the exam, talk about the hit list, any questions you've got, and then I've got a power drive set up, and the power drive is where I've got questions I'll put up on the screen. I'll give everybody about 45 seconds to think on your own, and then it's fair game. Call on anybody who I feel like calling on, and we'll go from there and just work our way through the problems together. I have a whiteboard. I can write on these things. Again, this is recorded so you can look back later. All right, let's talk about first what is on the exam. Okay, so I've got it right up here on the screen. Forecasting, the big thing is knowing what method to use when. This is probably one of the leading problems. We'll talk more about that. So you got to know that. You got to know your family of simple methods. That's your naive, your moving average, your weighted moving average. Exponential smoothing kind of goes into that as a simple method. And then you've got to know your methods of forecast error, either your mean absolute deviation or your mean absolute percentage of error, whichever one works for you. Seasonality, and then both types of regression, linear and simple. One is where we've got time as the independent variable, and the other is where we don't. We have two non-time variables. One is independent, one is dependent, and we're looking at the relationship between the two, and we're making a prediction based off of that. Break, separate from forecasting, we've also got on the exam our knowledge about economic order quantity and read order point, which we went through last week. So our references for this, everything we've done, the overviews, the U drives, solo drives, the squad drive we did last week, which I'm still very pleased with how you all did. The videos that I've done, regression, seasonality, in addition to recordings of our Zoom sessions here. And then, of course, we've got the, for lack of a better term, the almighty Pearson. Let's talk about format. Format's going to be similar to our past exam, the one that we've had. So probably 4 to 6 questions. I say 4 to 6 because right now I'm looking at 4, 2 of which have 2 parts. But it's not like the movie Rodney Dangerfield Back to School where you got like 26 parts on a question. Where I break out a question, I don't give additional subparts to the question. So if you see 6 questions, don't flip out. It's the same magnitude, the same kind of breadth as our last exam. And I am cognizant of what's feasible to do in a certain amount of time. Let me orient you real quick to what the exam format is going to look like. So first of all, now I brought this in. I apologize. So I'm a little bit out of order. Okay, let's talk about this first, and then I'll go down to the nuts and bolts of what it's going to look like to you. All right. And I haven't uploaded the presentation I'm covering right now onto Canvas. I will upload that immediately after our class today, and I will upload everything that you're seeing here today. So I'm going to show you an example of what the test is going to look like. I'm going to upload that. I'll upload this video, all that stuff I will upload immediately after we're done. Okay. Couple things. Number one, this is an individual exam. It's an open book, open note. The big thing I have to say here is just be mindful of time. The exam is going to open at 9:20 on Thursday on your Canvas assignment. So you'll see a Canvas assignment pop up. Boom. There it is. You'll download the Excel file. You'll do your work. You'll upload that Excel file all in Canvas, and you'll do that by 11:20. Now, conceivably, you could download the exam at 10 o'clock. I said PM on here. That's a mistake. I apologize. This is AM. So during normal class time. Apologize for that. So it's AM. So this time on Thursday, but earlier, 9:20 to 11:20. Back on task. So in theory, you could download the exam at 10 o'clock in the morning and turn it in by 11:20 if that's what you chose to do. Or you could download it at 9:20 and upload it back up by 9:50. It doesn't matter to me. I'm giving you a little bit of extra time on each end for the upload stuff and then some other stuff that you might choose to do that I'm going to talk about here in a second. Please do your own work. So please don't take a model and cut it in and paste it in. I really don't think there's a few conceptual questions where I ask you, hey, explain this in your own words, 1 to 3 sentences. I really don't know how you could cut and paste that out of someone else's work. I guess you could. It's physically possible if you really wanted to. I really can't see any of you doing that, just knowing you. But if you think about doing that, please don't do that. I mean, you're all smart people. Just bust the mic in your own words. I think you all know what you're doing by now. I feel pretty confident in you. I feel very confident. So, and just be mindful of plagiarism and dishonesty. So don't send somebody else an exam or whatever. I don't think you have time to do that anyway. This last bullet I'm going to add on to. So number one, if you have questions during the exam, I will be up on Zoom and you will have the Zoom instructions in the Canvas assignment instructions. So it'll be right there. Additionally, I will be standing by and you can call me. I will put out my phone number in the instructions. So if you're like, hey man, I don't want to mess with the whole Zoom thing right now. I'm in the middle of combat, but you want to get up on the phone and call me, that's cool. I thought about taking texts. I don't want to do that because I don't know how productive that would be if you're asking me a question on text. Either get on Zoom or pick up the phone, call me. I will literally be sitting here doing nothing else, just the same way that I would be if I was with you in the classroom. So I'm not going to be down in the basement lifting weights or doing something else. I'm going to be here waiting for your questions. And my policy always, or my policy stands on how I feel about questions during an exam, which is if you're in doubt, ask the question. The worst thing I can say to you is, hey, I'm sorry, I can't help you with that. But the last time I've said those words has been a long time. I can't remember. Usually I can do better than that. So if you have a question, I don't want you out there in the world, wherever you are in the world, and you're lost in the sauce. Come up on the net, ask me the question. Let's talk about what the exam is going to look like. So right here on your screen is an example question. Okay. It's not one that's going to appear on the exam, but it's a question, an example of what a question is going to look like. First of all, the entire exam is in Excel. That doesn't mean you have to do it in Excel. Okay, but the entire exam is in Excel. So for each problem, you'll have a separate tab down here. Okay, before, let's say this is the first question. Before this, the tab to the left, so to speak, you'll have an instructions tab. Okay, so you read through that. I'm going to get that out today so you don't have to mess with instructions on Thursday. So you'll have this. Okay, in this yellow box up here will be your narrative, what the question is all about, what you're used to reading on the top of U drives. I don't really have many special instructions like rounding and stuff. Your test is already written, by the way. I just got to proof it, dot all the I's and that kind of stuff. But your test is written. I don't have a whole lot of special instructions. It's pretty straightforward. And then you'll have your questions down here highlighted. If it's a discrete answer, you put your answer here in these gray boxes. Okay. Now, if it's a longer answer, like, for example, do you believe in the concept of infinity? Don't worry, I'm not going to ask that question. But in 3 to 4 sentences, provide your answer in a gray box. So you go down here and type your answer away. Pretty simple. Now, let's talk about showing your work. I know from surveys that's a concern of a few warriors, and I concur. So over here, and oh, by the way, before I move on this one, I didn't, but all the other questions, I have a little finish line down here on this left side. So as you're cruising down the left side and you go, okay, I answered that question, and there's my beautiful horizontal black bar, I'm done. That's your finish line. No more questions, nothing hanging down here below this line. All right, let's talk about this right side of the screen. We've got infinite space out here. Okay, so you can spread out, you can do what you want to, you can cut and paste data. You might have some data over here on the left-hand side, some givens. You can cut and paste those over here. You can do your entire model over here, whatever way that you want to do it. If you want to do things by hand, meaning you want to write them out on a sheet of paper, that's fine too. You don't have to make this into a beautiful portfolio thing that you're going to show at the Market Fair Arts or whatever. You could paste the photo in here, but you don't even have to get that fancy. Or you can upload the photo separately into Canvas. So you're going to give me this back with your answers here. And this might be blank because you've got your work on a separate piece of paper. That's fine too. I don't want to hamper you if you choose to do things manually. Only thing I ask is that I can read the photo or the scan. Okay. I know sometimes when we get that iPhone up there and we're hurrying and all that stuff, we don't have enough lighting. And so it's a little bit difficult to read. Even then, I can work with that. I don't want you to work on trying to create these, awesome studio conditions and those kind of things, but just be mindful of that. So when you're thinking about where you're going to take this exam on Thursday, again, I don't want you to stress out. Just think about, hey, do I have enough lighting? Do I have my stuff set up so I'm not messing with all the quote logistics of taking the exam? I can focus on the exam. Okay. I've talked about a lot of things about how this is going to go. Obviously, once you get all your stuff in here, you want to save it, and then you're going to upload it back to Canvas and send it to me. Um, Let me pause and get any and all questions you might have on anything I've said so far.
For the Pearson assignments, I think I did them already like a while ago, but I can't really see if there's any others that I didn't do. So I don't know, like what were all the ones again?
So the ones that were due would be to Alpha, to Bravo, and to Charlie. Those are all homeworks. The validation to Charlie would be the last one that was due this week that fell on this week. So we're talking, Kyle, we're talking about 3 homeworks, to Alpha, to Bravo, to Charlie, 1 validation to Charlie, and then the extra credit opportunity.
Was it all the stuff that was originally due the 29th?
Yes.
Yeah.
How many of those hats do you have?
Enough.
Enough. Okay. Does that answer your question, Kyle?
Yeah.
All right. Other questions from anybody on anything that I've covered about how this exam is going to go, all that stuff. Okay. As always, that's not a one-time question. So if you want to ask a question, you just don't want to ask it right now, or you think of something once we get off the call, you know how to get a hold of me, please do. I don't want you to stress about how this thing is going to go. I do want you to be prepared though. Okay, with that, here's what we're going to do. Let's go into our power drive. Let me clear up my screen here. Get rid of that. And let me get my share back up here. All right. Okay, so again, here's how this is going to roll. I'm just going to throw something up on the screen, ask you a question, and give you about 45 seconds, and then it's game on. I'll ask any one of you to start us off on some kind of critical thinking. Be the penguin, meaning this is our safe space. So if you don't know, hey, I don't know. Okay, it's okay. There's no quote, there are quote right answers, but the main thing about today is just for us to see where we're at, key up on some things, and, and continue to prep. So I don't want anybody to be like, I don't know, and I feel punked out or whatever. All right. So here we go. With these actuals, which methods would be best for forecasting March or April? So don't try to solve the problem just yet. Just think about which methods would be best that you could use. So I'll give you a few seconds here. Think on your own. And again, if you've got the ability to show your screen, I would prefer that instead of the CIA kind of black screen that I look at with some of you. I'd just rather see your faces out there because I like seeing you. Okay, Ethan Locker, why don't you start us off? What do you think? With these numbers, what kind of methods would be best?
Well, I was looking over what kind of forecasting options. Naive.
So, okay. So what are the numbers doing?
They're increasing.
Okay. They're increasing. So naive would work because they're increasing. Okay. Are there other methods that we might use? What do you think, Myra?
Sorry, I forgot I was muted.
That's all right.
Moving averages.
Moving averages. So I don't know if I would use a moving average here because the numbers are increasing.
Okay.
So when we think about, they're kind of going like this. So we talked about naive. Okay. Ames, what do you think?
You could also use the smoothing method one.
Yeah. What kind of constant would we use?
One above 0.5.
One above 0.5. Yeah, I think we'd use a higher constant. So it could be 0.5. With these numbers, we might use, all the way up. Remember that constant can go between 0 and 1. So we can go all the way up to 1. So we could go up to 0.99 if we wanted to. But a smoothing constant would work well too with these numbers. All right?
Is that because it's increasing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's because it looks like this line right here. And any other methods that we could use? Let's see. What do you think, Kyle?
I mean, I don't want to say the wrong answer,
Okay.
but I don't know. Oh, yeah.
We could use regression. Okay. But most of the time we want to use regression when numbers look like this. When we can see that there's, and again, this is time. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So don't forget about that. When we see the numbers kind of a steady pattern that we can count on, we could use regression there too. Okay. Any questions on that one from anyone?
What is the method called that uses the smoothing constant?
The exponential smoothing method.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay. Any other questions? All right. Let's do this one. How do we determine a seasonal forecast for 2022 with this data? We're given that the overall forecast for, actually it's a typo, I apologize. This should be 2020. Okay. So we are given that the overall forecast for the year will be 16,000. So how do we determine a seasonal forecast? So don't try to solve the whole thing. we're just gonna each kind of work through pieces. Okay. So let's see here on my new screen. AJ, what's the first thing you think we would do? AJ, you out there? Okay. How about Jasmine? What do you think?
Sorry, repeat the question.
Yeah. So if we're going to do a seasonal forecast with this data, what is the first thing that you think we'd do? What is the first thing you would do?
Well, I would take the average for each. I would take the average for each season. So like spring for 2017, 2018, and 2019, and then summer and so on and so forth.
So you do something like this?
Yeah.
And you get an average here?
Yeah.
Okay, good. And you do that here and here and here. Okay. Teresa, what do you think the next thing we would do is?
Then I would take an average of all of the averages that you just found.
Super. So we could do it like this. So I call this the A of A, the average of the averages. Okay. Ellie, what do you think we'd do next?
Find the index.
Okay. How do we do that?
You take the seasonal over the total average, the seasonal average over the total average.
Okay. So which number?
The spring average divided by the total average.
All right. So I'm going to take this number here divided by that,
Yeah.
and we'll call that an SI. Okay. And then Kylie, what's the next thing we're going to do?
So then the next thing that you would do is, given the 16,000 that you have, divide that by 4 for spring, summer, fall, winter. And then that number is multiplied by your index, I believe. Yes.
Okay. Good. So let's just recap on some things. That's all very good. All right. So we're going to get these seasonal indexes, and the seasonal index is kind of like a dial. So when Kylie took this number and divided it by 4, so whatever that is, I don't know how it is evenly off. I guess it's 4,000. Okay. So that seasonal index for winter is going to be above 1. I'm guessing. Okay. So because it's a little bit higher. So essentially whatever that number is tells us that we're going to do that much more than 4,000. Okay. So these seasonal indexes are like a dial telling us to turn up the quantity within that particular quarter or down. Okay. So when I multiply seasonal indexes by that 4,000, I'm going to get 4 numbers out here that are not all the same. And that is going to be my 2020 forecast that I was looking for. Now, Gary, what is my ice cube check to make sure I didn't mess up? What's the last thing I want to do?
For this one,
Because I could just stick with these
noticed
numbers and say, there you
regression.
go. Yeah, go ahead.
So you're trying to give me a hint. I see 4 lines, but other than that, I'm trying to think. I can't think of it right now.
Okay, that's all right. Ethan Green, what do you think?
You would add up the 2020 numbers and you should get 16,000.
Roger that. That make sense, Gary? So I'm going to add all these, and they should equal 16,000,
Do with a line.
which is that there. So I'm going to get these 4 numbers. Okay, I'm going to get my seasonal indices. I'm going to multiply each seasonal indice by this number, which is 4,000. That's going to give me these 4 numbers. These 4 numbers refer to each quarter.
For some reason, I can't hear you.
Okay. Can everyone else hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I'm just going to continue. So that's my double check there. And sometimes we get kind of confused in the process. We get a different number here, which is why I always like to add those up again. I got some stuff on chat, so I'm just going to go to my chat real quick. Okay. So any questions from anyone on this? Any discussion points, anything like that? Okay. This probably isn't in the best time that I've shown this. So I apologize for that. But the main thing, I think everyone who contributed this knows the nuts and bolts. And this is a lot of a muscle memory thing. I think once you do this once, twice, you know all these steps without even really knowing that, hey, I'm doing this step, kind of like stuff in athletics. You don't know that I'm doing this certain thing when I'm swinging to hit the ball. You just know to do it. And if you do it right, you hit the ball. So enough said on that. Let's go on to this next one. Okay, how do we determine which forecast is more accurate? So we've got this top line of blue actual data, and then we've got two forecasts that have been done in the past, forecast one and forecast two.
Are you screen sharing right now?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
Thank
all
you.
right.
Now I'm glad you spoke up. Let me we good now?
Yep.
All right, super. Thank you. Okay, so we have the blue actual numbers that have happened. That's what actually sold. And then we look back at our forecasts and we find our two forecasts. So out of these, how do we quantifiably determine which forecast was more accurate? So I'll give you a few seconds to think about that. You don't have to solve it, but begin to solve it. So I'm going to ask you, okay, what would you do first? What would you do next? Those kind of things. Okay, Hannah, what's the first thing that you would do?
Would you just compare it to the actuals?
Okay. How would we compare it?
That I'm not sure of.
Okay. Brandon, what do you think?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you great.
Okay. You would want to find the absolute value of like the actual minus the forecast, and whichever one's closer to 0 would be more accurate.
Okay, so let's just break this down. So probably what I want to do is you're on the right track. So I want to create a new table. Okay, so if this is the absolute value of the difference for forecast one, Brandon, what number would go here?
2,000.
Okay. And then what number would go here?
1,155.
1,155. Okay. So, Tim, what's the next thing I would do?
Just do the same thing throughout and then find the average differences.
Okay. Good. And then once I have those average differences, Josh, what would I do with those? So let's say that this number is 2,000 and this number is 1,200.
Did you divide them by each other?
No.
No, I have no idea there.
Okay. Let me make this more clear. So this number is 2,000. This number is 1,200. Trevor, what do you think?
Wouldn't you just see that, like, since the one's 1,200 and the other one's 2,000, the forecast 2 would be more accurate?
Okay. So that's correct. What does this 1,200 mean, Trevor?
Is that just like how many units we were above or below? I guess it could be.
Right.
Than the actual.
Yes. That is the average of how many units we were either above or below the actual at any given time, which is what you said. And this 2,000 is the same thing, only it's greater. And because this is greater than that, this means forecast 1, like you said, was less accurate. We had more error than forecast 2. And what we just did is the mean absolute deviation, or the MAD, what I like to say. Okay. Now there's another technique, the MAPE. That's a little more complicated. It still works. Okay. But we have to get percentages in here, and then we take the average percentage, which is what that stands for. So on MAPE, this M is the same as that M. This A is the same as this A, but this stands for percentage of error. Now, let's see. Chris Avocado, are you still out there? Or Chris anybody? He was there. I saw him earlier. Saw the mysterious screen. So Emily, if I do a MAPE, then, and I get, well, first of all, Emily, if I do a MAPE, and right now I'm saying that this forecast is the least accurate and this is the most, meaning forecast 2 is the most accurate. If I do a MAPE, do you think that will change my findings?
No, I don't think it will.
Okay. Why? Remember, just because I asked you a question doesn't mean that you're incorrect. Why don't you think it will change my findings?
Because you're still doing like your actual minus your forecast, and then you're just kind of putting it in a percent.
Yep, that is correct. So whatever way I skin the cat, I should still come to the same outcome, assuming that I know what I'm doing. Okay. So if I do this incorrectly, well, then the game has changed. But if I do the MAPE correctly and I do the MAD correctly, I should get the same outcome. I won't get the same numbers over here because, like Emily said, I'll be looking at percentages, and those are different numbers. And when I do the MAPE, if I get a percentage over here, that tells me the percentage I'm off, either high or low at any given time, like Trevor expressed. When I do it in a MAD, personally, I like the MAD because it's amount of units, but I can see where both are of value. Okay. If I have one forecast where I'm off by 30% and another where I'm off by 3%, I'm probably going to want to go with that forecasting method that I'm off by 3%. Okay. So the bottom line is know how to determine forecast error. If I have 3 forecasts down here, the process would be the same. I just have a black row. Okay. I'm going to take the absolute deviation. That's this number. Okay. And I'm going to keep doing that. If you do this in Excel, it's great because you can set up your formula and then you just drag it. In this case, you would drag it to the right. Or if you set it up vertically, you can drag it down. And at the end, you take the average. Once you get those averages, you don't do anything with them crossways. You just compare them. which one is bigger, which one is smaller. The one that is smaller has the less error. Any questions on forecast error? Okay. And this is what we just talked about. It doesn't matter what method we use as long as we know what we're doing. We should have the same outcome. In your own words, what's the purpose of EOQ? Why do we do this EOQ thing? Allie, what do you think?
So EOQ, economic order quantity, is like the least amount of like inventory you can have to meet like demand.
You're definitely on the right track. So it's the least amount of inventory. Let's think also about purpose. Myra, what do you think? Actually, I'm sorry, Luke. I haven't heard from you yet. What do you think? What are we trying to do here? Allie said the least amount, and we're on to that. It is the least amount of something, but what is the overall purpose?
Well, it's more for like efficiency. So you're looking at your holding costs and operational setup costs, and you're trying to find them like where those two meet, so you can figure out how much you want to buy and at what price, so you're not spending too much or too little of money. So it's like right. So it's like right in the middle of like that.
Yeah. So we want to balance.
Yeah.
We want to balance, but the overall purpose, and I think Allie and Luke, kind of got to it, is we want to minimize. I got to be able to spell it to do it. Minimize overall costs in terms of that are associated with inventory. Okay, which are my little kind of graph here, not so good. I apologize. It looks more like a dude with glasses on. Anyway, so this is our holding costs, and this is our order setup costs. And we want to balance those out. And the point at which we can balance those, we have the lowest overall cost. Okay. Anywhere along the way. So if holding costs are out of balance, meaning greater or lower than ordering and setup costs, our total costs will be higher. Okay. Remember that graph where we had ordering setup costs over time, and then we had holding costs over time. And so this point right here is this point right here. Okay. And if we draw a cost line, that is where our total costs are the lowest, which is the name of the game in operations management most of the time. Okay. So that's what we're trying to do. That's the prize. We're trying to minimize costs. We know the primary costs associated with inventory are holding and ordering / setup costs. And so we want to balance those out, because we know at the point at which they're balanced is the point of the lowest cost possible in terms of total costs. Okay. So hopefully this picture or some of the other ones I provided will be like a tattoo in your brain. We're trying to balance, but what's more important than balancing is minimizing costs. Balance is how we achieve the minimization of costs. Okay. Any questions here? All right. What are two key conditions? Just two. Very simple. Two conditions that must be valid, meaning they must be in existence, meaning they must be occurring in order to use the economic order quantity model. Very simple. So if these conditions are not present, we can't use EOQ. It just is not going to work. Okay. So think. Okay, AJ, what do you think about this one?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Demand.
Okay, what about demand?
Like you need to have that to do the equation.
Okay, you need to have it. What has to be characteristic of demand? What kind of characteristic must demand possess?
I'm not too sure what you're kind of
Okay.
asking.
All right. Gilbert, what do you think?
Demand has to be constant in order to use economic order quantity.
Outstanding. Demand must be constant. 5 per day, 10 per day, 17 per day, 20 per day, but 20 per day for a year, that kind of thing. If it's 18 one day and 5 another day and 7 another day and then 3,500 another day, we can't use EOQ. We can't use EOQ because we have so much variation. Or the point is, we just have variation. It's not a matter of so much, we have variation. When we have demand being constant, we do not have variation. Okay. And again, you can see in reality, this is a relatively, you might go, well, this is a limited model. Again, remember it's to develop a base. So super, good job. Trevor, what do you think is the other condition? So Gilbert mentioned one. What is another one?
Would it be quantity or quality or not? Never mind.
Okay, Hannah, what do you think?
Wouldn't the ordering cost have to be constant?
Ordering costs. Probably so. But I think there's one even simpler that we've got to key in on. What do you think, Teresa?
The lead time has to be constant.
Absolutely. Okay. And Hannah, ordering costs might be one too. I don't have the full list of assumptions in front of me. But the ones that I think are key and essential, and for lack of a better term, what I would really like you guys to cue in on it is these two. So if lead time is changing, meaning one day or one time it's two days, and another day it's 5, another day it's 3, we shouldn't be using the EOQ model. We have other models for that kind of situation, but we should not use EOQ. Okay? Questions on that from anyone? Okay. With these actuals, which methods would be best for forecasting March and April? So take a look at that. What do you think, Ellie? What methods would be good for this kind of data, this kind of actuals?
Maybe some weighted averages.
Okay. And why do you say that?
I don't know. I just think that's what you do because it's not linear. It goes up and down.
Yeah. So if we draw this thing and stick with my actual color. So we start at 2,300 and then we kind of go down, and then we kind of go up to 3,000, then we kind of go down, And then we kind of go back. So we have some kind of average going on here. And what a weighted average do, or a weighted or the moving average, is essentially trying to cut a line through that. So we could also use a moving average or the moving weighted average. Those would probably be best here because the actuals are tending to kind of average out. Okay.
What do you think about like a not seasonal, but like a monthly index? Because I mean, you have October, December, and February, which if you're thinking about like chocolate, those are 3 holidays that have a lot of chocolate. Could be like a seasonal, not like seasonal, but like a monthly demand.
So like a monthly knob. Well, you know, actually that the first thing that comes to mind is exponential smoothing. But I don't, essentially I'd be changing the knob from month to month, and I guess that would work. Let's make sure that, because somebody asked me about that, so I just want to put the formula up on the screen while we're on the topic. So remember, with exponential smoothing, I'm saying that a forecast for a month, I need the forecast from the previous month plus some other stuff, but I need 3 things. I don't want to do that. Okay, so I have my smoothing constant here. I have this difference. This is not absolute, by the way. These are just normal brackets. If this is negative, I want it to be negative because it's going to bring this down. Back to Kyle's point, what happens when we choose this value? So let's say we choose a 0.9. We're turning that dial up and we're putting the most emphasis on this difference here from the previous month. Well, when we turn it down, we're putting less emphasis on this difference from the previous month and more emphasis on the previous months. So I guess you could kind of do that from month to month with what you're talking about. Does that make sense?
What does the A represent in that again?
So the A in this represents the actual from the previous time period. So if, and I don't, you could use exponential smoothing here. I would use a lower constant. So I would probably use 0.5 or even less. Okay. So if I'm forecasting for March, this would be March. This all would be, each one of these would be from February. So I'd need my forecast from February. And I'd need my actual from February.
Which is 3,500. Okay.
Okay. So I don't have a forecast line here. All right. But I could use exponential smoothing with this kind of stuff too. I wouldn't use this. I'd use something lower because these are evening out. And when I use a lower smoothing constant, I'm putting less emphasis on the difference between just the month that just happened and more on all of these, which is what moving averages do, especially weighted ones. It's the same kind of thing. Remember, with a weighted moving average, if I use a weight for my most recent month of like 0.7, I'm putting the most average or the most weight, essentially 70% of the weight on that difference there or on that month and less on the previous ones. So, but like a seasonal index from month to month, I mean, I think of any of the formulas, I would choose this one if I wanted to approach it that way. Okay.
Okay.
All right. I think we got a couple more. Okay. What method or methods, there's a little bit of a hint there, can we use to forecast for April? What do you think, Gilbert?
You probably want to use moving weighted average since you're trying to forecast 2 months in advance.
Okay. So let's focus on what's going on here and what our challenge is in doing this. All right. So let's just assume, and this is probably what I should have put up here, is that we have forecasts for each one of these months. Actually, no, we don't. We do not have forecasts for each one of these. Okay, so number one, we don't have forecasts for all these months. We just have the actuals. And even worse, we don't have that. We're trying to jump out here. So what do you think, Gary? Oh, Gary can't talk. That's all right. Teresa, what do you think?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Gary, I can hear you. Just got to shout.
Yeah. I'm thinking. Honestly, I would agree with Gilbert, except I don't. I got no idea.
Okay. So for any of the averages, we need the previous month.
Oh, damn, you're right.
Okay, so that's a big kind of a problem that we have.
I completely missed that.
Okay.
Spaced out. Can't really do. Can't do weighted average. Can't do naive. Could you maybe do regression?
Bingo. So, Teresa, what is our next step? What is our next step toward doing it? And oh, by the way, just to beat the dead horse, sorry, Kylie, this is the only method that would work here. And the reason it's the only method is because of that right there. Because we don't have that. And we don't have these forecasts here. These are all actuals. So I'm just trying to overstate the obvious by saying, hey, this is when you have this kind of situation, and it definitely you're skipping time periods, this should flash like big time, like a Guns N' Roses concert. The only thing you can do here is regression. So Teresa, what's the first thing we would do to get started, or one of the first things?
So for regression, you have to find the slope and y-intercept. But for that, you need an x and a y variable. So I guess you would make each month like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Super. So I'd turn that October into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Just like Teresa said, this would be our X. This would be our Y. And from there, we can go into Excel and rock this out. We want to make sure that when we use something like this, slope in Excel, we're going to load in those Y's first. So we're going to highlight this array okay, and put those in there first and then the X's. And as long as we put them in the same order, we'll be okay. All right. And then we're going to get that slope. We're going to get that intercept. We're going to make an equation for the line. All right. And rock on with regression. But the big thing here is so that is kind of a trick. Actually, it's supposed to be meant as a hint. That's why I put it in parentheses to kind of make a hint that, hey, there's only one method, and it's this bad boy right here. Okay. Any questions on that? More discussion? Okay. I think we got, let's see, a few more. All right. With EOQ, what's the difference between these dudes? We have N, we have T, we have EOQ itself. Trying to share the love. So Josh, what do you think? What is N?
Maybe I don't know, something pops in my head as a number, but I feel like that's wrong. I have no idea.
Okay, so number is correct.
Okay.
The number of what?
Units?
Okay, so what do you think, Jasmine? I'm trying to read lips. I think you're on mute.
My bad.
It's okay. It's all right.
I said EOQ talked about how much, while N talked about how many times, and T talked about how much time passes.
Okay, good. Very good. So when we order, how much? Okay, so the units here would be whatever the items are. So units. So if we're talking about cases of toilet paper, this would be cases. If we're talking about T-shirts, it'd be whatever unit they come in, unit of issue kind of thing. Could be T-shirts. What was the next thing you said, Jasmine? You talked about that.
I said N is about how many times.
Okay. So Josh, you were right. It's how many times. Okay. But this is going to be how many times. So the number of times. Okay. And times that you order throughout the year. So if N is 4, that means I order 4 times throughout the year. Okay. And then last one, Jasmine, again, please.
T is how much time passes.
Okay. Time passes or is in between. And I think she said that earlier. So from one order to the next. So if T here is 4, it's usually going to be in days. The main thing that I want you guys to focus on, and I'll just, on the exam, if I ask you for these things, any one or all or part or whatever, I'm going to ask you to express it in the appropriate, is it cases? Is it the number of times? Is it days? So instead of just 4, I want to hear from you what that 4 is. Is it 4 days? Is it 4 times? Is it 4 units or cases? Okay, so it's important that you know what the differences between these things are. And I have some stuff going on chat. I just need to check. Okay. All right, super. Got just a few more minutes. I think we kind of talked about this one. Okay, these are important. So Joan thinks that concert posters, let's think about this wording here. I really want you to focus in on the wording and focus in on the wording as opposed to how the table is set up. Joan thinks that concert posters are dependent on the amount of concert t-shirts sold. Okay, so think about the first question I want to ask you is, which is the dependent variable? Which is the independent variable? Okay, which is dependent, which is independent, and why does it matter?
You have
Could
to
you
share your
start
screen
there?
again.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Fight the technology. Here we go. All right, so once again, here's this. Read this first. Joan thinks that concert posters are dependent on the amount of concert t-shirts sold. So which is t-shirts dependent or is posters dependent? What do you think, Myra?
I forgot I'm not muted.
It's okay.
I said the t-shirts are your X and the posters are your Y.
Okay. So really, and that is correct. So just because you get a data table, and again, I'm not trying to trick you if you see this kind of thing, but sometimes folks they trick themselves too. All right. So the main thing is that we want to set up our data correctly. So we would probably want it to look like this. Okay. And like Myra said, and Myra said that t-shirts are independent. So that would be X. And the posters, which are dependent, are Y. And Tim, why do I even care?
Depending on what you set up is what it'll change what your what your what's the word I'm looking for? Your the y-intercept and the slope.
Yeah. Yeah, good. So, exactly. So when I go to determine the slope of this line, all right, like we talked about further before and what Tim just mentioned, I need to load in those Y's first. So if I think t-shirts are Y's, my slope's going to be all messed up. Okay. And so here I would only want to, I double check myself. If the question is something like, okay, so Joan wants to know if she sells 600 shirts, how many posters should she expect to sell? This is a regression problem. Okay. But I need to identify these and get this data right, because otherwise, if I use the previous table, I'd be putting the X's in here first and not even realizing it. Okay. So just take the time to make sure that you identify what's dependent on what. And you might also have two situations. So let's say we have t-shirts and posters, and we have t-shirts and I don't know, something that doesn't go with t-shirts, like I don't know, crazy hats. Those kind of go with t-shirts. All right. And so we have some data here. And so we're trying to decide, if we sell t-shirts and we know we're going to sell 600, should we position them next to the posters, or we should position them next to the hats in terms of our display in the concert arena? Because, obviously the ones that sell more. So let's say we do our regression. In this kind of problem, we'd do a regression. We'd find out the slope for this data set. We'd find out what this is. let's say this is 800. We do, and then we break, we do work over here, and we find out we have a different slope for this data. We have a different intercept, and we find out this is 400. Well, then our choice would be, we would want to position the shirts next to the posters, okay, as opposed to the hats, because yeah, there's a dependency here, but you know, we want to sell more. And assuming that these are equally priced, then we would want to do this kind of arrangement, okay, to get the most out of our setup there. Okay, that's any questions on anything that we talked about today? Anything at all, big or small? There are no dumb questions. Okay. I will post this video. I will clean up those products that I have. I will post those all on today's Canvas. I cannot think of any alibis that I had. I will hang out till everybody clears this Zoom, just in case there's folks that want to ask questions. Hang around, ask questions, whatever. Otherwise, have a great day and good luck on Thursday.
Thank you.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I know on Pearson there was a question about like optimal or whatever that was. It was like an optimal question. They had like an equation. There's like D over P and all that stuff, and I didn't know how to do it.
Yeah. I apologize for that. I think that was a question I've since removed.
Oh, okay.
But if it's still there, then let me know.
I did it a few days ago. So I mean,
Did you do it just recently, AJ, or like?
no, I did it like last week.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't worry about that one. I took it off. I shouldn't have never had it on there in the first place.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. Cool. Take care.
See you later.